Hi, and welcome to All the Woo A to Z. We're your hosts, Suzanne.
And Mychal, and this is season 2. Hello, I'm Mychal, and I have been trying really hard to integrate red into my wardrobe.
And I'm Suzanne, and I am on the project, almost to the end of the project at my parents' house.
Nice.
Perhaps.
Yes.
Cross fingers, cross toes.
And this is All the Woo.
A to Z, and we just want to welcome you to our non-judgmental table where we talk about things that we know and have experienced and have studied. And at the very least, we hope you're entertained.
And today we are talking about I for
Initiation.
Yes.
Dum, dum, dum.
So we're pairing for initiation. I had a little conversation with Suzanne beforehand because what I wanted to do was pick a beverage that I think everyone can relate. If you've had alcohol and you have finally found an alcohol beverage of some kind that you actually enjoy,
Mm-hmm.
but chances are you probably had a lot of misses before you got the hit, right? That's probably how it went. And it probably was maybe something bad like Malort, or you had a warm Captain and Coke, or any number of things like that was really bad.
I told her about my experience with extremely cheap vodka and sugar-free Kool-Aid, and Mychal visibly winced.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And there's not that there's anything, I'm sure that there's people who genuinely enjoy those beverages, and that's not to knock them. But as being your introduction into alcohol, it can be a little jarring. Let's put it that way. Right. And typically, you'll end up having somebody who will, that initiate you into being like, let me show you something that,
I'm gonna blow your mind.
yeah, let me just give me a moment and let me get you something and have you try this. And so for Suzanne in particular, it was a
Kir Royale.
and a Kir Royale is a traditional, it's a cocktail, but it's a wine and spirits cocktail together. Depending on what you're using for the mixer, it can be called a sham sham for Chambord and champagne.
Mm.
But typically it's Chambord or Creme de Cassis liqueur that's being put into bubbles of some kind, typically champagne.
Mm-hmm.
So what we are using today is Schramsberg Blanc de Blanc along with Chambord. And the reason why I'm using Schramsberg, again, is at a level where it's like you didn't just happen to buy bubbles. Like you invested a little bit into doing it. Like it was very intentional that you bought these. They are great to drink on their own, and a lot of people do, but it's also not so expensive like other champagnes that you can get from France, where you feel bad putting something in it to mix it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So this is my reasoning for the pairing as being a very intentional, typically a bridge or a gateway into elevating into some kind of knowing or experience.
And that right there is the definition of an initiation.
Yay.
So as we are stepping into the gateway of talking about initiation, what makes this woo? Like, what doesn't make this woo? But what makes this woo?
Let's pretend that you don't think that this is woo. I would say, because the majority of initiations that are, because they're typically very formalized, and ceremonial.
Mm-hmm.
And for this reason, if you really kind of break it down, because they're so symbolic in all the actions and words being used, that in order to symbolize something as a step up or into or through some kind of doorway, that's some kind of birthing essentially that's happening, it needs to be momentous, and it ends up being very sympathetic magic depending on what it's for.
But in all of these, it's carving that moment in time out of the ordinary and the everyday.
Mm-hmm.
And so, regardless of what your personal affiliation may be with whatever church you grew up in, you probably remember if you were confirmed, if you had first communion, if you got baptized, any of those things, because they are taking extraordinary time moments and carving them out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
And I think that and the elevation part are the two kind of components of
Mhm.
initiation. But I think that the benefit of it is that you have something to kind of be like, oh, I was like this before and I'm like this now.
Mhm.
Like I used to drink vodka and Kool-Aid before
Warm. Yeah. And now I put ice in
out
it.
of plastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now I have some sense and taste. But yes, and I think the other part that kind of makes it woo is you very rarely do it on your own.
Yes.
You have someone who has taken it upon themselves or been decreed by some system
Mhm.
to help you through.
Mhm. Being some kind of authority.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So the Cure Royales or my great friend Kate, who, yeah, she was just elegant. She was just fancy. But she was fancy in a very relatable way. Like the
Mhm.
first time we met for lunch, she walks in and she's wearing white denim and espadrilles and big Jackie O glasses, and she's got a perfect haircut. And she sits down and immediately starts talking and then pours red wine all over herself. And it was like that moment, it was that contrast. And we talked about
Mhm.
this often. And her daughters would always say, that was the moment where you and mama fell in love with each other, is that here she was, you were thinking she was all fancy and she was thinking you were all elegant. And then, she poured wine on herself.
Mhm.
And so, but that kind of process.
Yes.
And I would say almost all significant relationships happen that way.
I didn't pour anything on myself when we met.
No, but I think we've told the story
Yes.
before, but the absolute, so I'm going to Egypt.
Yeah. So we're best friends now. Okay. Got it.
And my husband just being like, I'm going to go open another bottle because, yeah, this is done now.
I always think about the movie Stepbrothers, where I don't know if you saw that movie or not, but they
I've not been initiated into that.
exactly. I don't know. I don't know. You may or may not like the movie, but there's a point where so these two stepbrothers, they're grown adults, but they're also just like ridiculously
This isn't the one with
young.
Arnold Schwarzenegger and Danny DeVito.
No, 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 no.
Okay.
This is Will
No,
Ferrell
that's twins.
and yes, forget the name of the other actor. But anyway, they kind of hate each other because they feel like they're fighting for the same place in their
Mhm.
parents' lives, and they find something where they're like, "Wait, you like this? I like this." Like that kind of
Mhm.
moment, and then they go, "Are we best friends now?" And he's like, "Yup." Like that's kind of that's always what
I
I
can
think
hear Will Ferrell saying that.
about. And so then they just do everything together because they are essentially the same person. Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
So yes. What are some other initiations you've experienced?
Um,
Because I imagine there's quite a few, because with all the things that you have been involved in.
mhm,
So going to jujitsu, obviously
mhm,
ballet, being an artist, being a server, being a som,
mhm.
I'm sure I'm missing at least 15 things, but
So many things. Well, also that I was raised Roman Catholic, right? So I went through,
mhm,
like you were just saying, like I went through First Communion and confession and all of those things
mhm.
in relation to the Roman Catholic Church. And those are very formalized events.
And I'm sure the metaphysical school had
Yes, also did.
lots of
Yes.
candles and chanting. And were there robes with hoods involved?
No
I'm so
hoods.
disappointed.
There was ropes. There was ropes, but
A
that was
robe without a hood is just a cloak.
right. Yeah, it was yellow. This was for the first year that well, it's considered the first year, but like the first step,
Mhm,
which takes more than a year.
mhm.
Saying first year is misleading. So, yes,
They said the
that.
first 17 months people would drop out, yeah.
Yes. So, and you also had to travel someplace else. So, I went to a
Mhm,
whole other state in order
mhm.
to receive your certification, diploma,
And
whatever.
oftentimes that is a component of initiation, is you
Mhm.
are in an unfamiliar environment, so that you really do have a sense of being isolated and becoming more committed to the thing that You are there to profess or join or whatever.
Mhm.
So, yeah, so right on. Although of all the places, they probably, nail it more than most.
Let's see. Also, with the quartermaster sommeliers and let's see, the W set program. So, Psalm like initiations there. There is, again, you get certifications and there's a whole process of testing. So, again, your name gets read out loud. You get a pin. You get flair for both
Mhm.
of those schools that you get to wear. And
And I
it's
think that's probably another thing about initiation is you have something that proves that you have been through that particular series, whether that's,
mhm,
I would imagine after confirmation, you got like a cross or something to wear,
mhm,
but some kind of adornment that helps you
identify you.
identify, but also to remind you that you have made this commitment so that you can look back to that moment and go, oh, right.
Yes. Yes. I'm trying to think for dance, for service, and it's less formalized.
Hmm.
I think it's just more like a rite of passage. Just go through stuff. That's a little bit different. I don't know.
All the different layers of the Nutcracker.
Yeah,
You're
maybe.
going through as what? A flower. Then you become a
That could yeah.
fairy. Then you become I can say this because Kate's daughters, my goddaughters, yes, went
But
through that same
that could be it.
process.
Yes, as far as levels of where your technique was, of what kind of roles you would qualify for, not just for age, but ability.
Mhm.
So that could definitely be a thing. There's also levels within dance companies, being a core versus a soloist versus a principal
Mhm.
dancer. And oftentimes, when not all the time, but sometimes, depending on what company you're with, when you get that elevation into the next role at the end of a show, you'll get called out, or during a rehearsal or something like that, around everyone else, you get called out and everybody applauds. That can be a
Mhm.
thing. Other than that, I don't know. I'm sure there's plenty of other things.
It
I think that covers a lot, though. How about you?
does. I've been through, obviously quite a few initiations, but I think mine are in some ways a little, not all of them, but some of them less formal.
Hmm.
So, publishing my first book,
Yes.
joining a group of people who, at the time were publishing their first book, but also, that does set you apart from a lot of other people.
Hmm.
And then publishing your fifth book and, just moving on through that.
Hmm.
And whether or not that becomes, and I think this is where a strange form of self discipline has to take place, that you acknowledge to yourself what
Hmm.
you have accomplished and the threshold or the that you are crossing over. And even if there's nobody else who's there understanding what it is to go from publishing your ninth book to your 10th book,
Hmm.
that you make that significance make that significant marker in your head
Yes.
because you are the one who is in the process of transforming yourself.
Hmm.
And I think that's part of the woo of initiation is we move away from the formalities of a church or a school or a company or whatever and recognize our own progressions in life
Hmm.
and the significance. So we're making those markers in our mind so that we know, okay, I am different today than I was yesterday, and this is why.
Hmm.
And I think both you and I have used this as, I'm not going to say an excuse, but there have been times where it's been like, okay, you know what? This piece of jewelry is signifying this thing.
Hmm.
I am changed at this moment, and I am wearing this to not only declare it to myself, but to remind myself when I forget it
Yes.
that I choose differently, I behave differently, I act differently.
Hmm.
Sorry, I'm editing that in my head because act and behave are basically the same thing.
It's okay. It's okay.
So those kinds of things. But I think that's also one of the things that in the woo concept helps life get richer
Hmm.
in that you are aware of the subtle changes and the texture
Hmm.
of your life and that kind of progression when there's nobody else to really point it out.
True. So I know I'm going backwards in the conversation here, but I think that kind of marries the two things that we were just talking about as far as having a very formalized, very versus an informal
Mhm.
recognition
Mhm.
of growth, right? So for martial arts, a lot of
Mhm.
people will be like, "Oh, well, what belt are you?" Right? You'll
Right.
hear people say that. And if you don't do martial arts, then you probably know that you'll see colors and that those colors probably mean something, but only for those people who are actually in martial arts would probably typically know or know somebody who's in it. That being said, when you, at least from where I was studying, because I have not been to a bunch of different martial arts schools, let me just put it that way, that your rank is basically instilled in you from the very first class.
Mhm.
And that is because before class, well, when class begins and when class ends, you all line up. And it's not just like, oh, find a spot, get in where you can fit in. No, you line up based
According to that
upon,
hierarchy?
yes. So typically the people who are up front are those going from the most advanced going to the least advanced. And that even goes based upon how long you've been there.
Mhm.
And like if you've been there, I'm just starting, this is my first week versus I'm still a white belt. However, I've been doing this for a couple of years, right?
Mhm.
Even in that part, you're lining up based upon time and also capability. So that's why you'll see sometimes that there will be a stripe on somebody's belt
Mhm.
because you get so many stripes before you move to the next color. So you also will line up based upon color and stripes. And even when you are working in class and, for lack of a better term, sparring,
Mhm.
that if there's somebody who's also sparring next to you who is of a higher rank for you and space is becoming a commodity,
Mhm.
you move for them. And
Mhm.
it's very visual, so that's the formalized part where you see it, you can identify who
Mhm.
somebody is and their accomplishment,
Mhm.
but then also kind of every day you're very aware of when you move up too, because I can tell you, as somebody who especially in the very beginning was like, I actually have a little bit of authority here
Uh-huh.
in this, in that, you know, I may not have been here as long as some people have been here, but I'm also definitely here longer than that person is. Like at least I made it that far.
See these stripes? Kiss it. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So, but what's funny is that a lot of people who just start don't know that. And
Mhm.
it's kind of a weird thing that feels awkward to tell somebody that and be like, "No, you move down the line. This is
Mhm.
not where you belong." And most of the
Mhm.
time people will be nice about it and sometimes people won't be, but if you don't tell somebody then they don't
But
know.
you were the one doing the initiation in that case.
I guess
Being
so.
like, I am yeah, when I was in grade school, our grade school was broken up, and we had, like, one half of the school, like, 1st through 5th on one end, and then we had kind of a dead space in between, and
Mhm.
then we had 6th, 7th, and 8th on the other end,
Mhm.
and it even though you were separated by, I don't know, 10 feet maybe was that dead space between the upper school and the lower school, which we didn't even call them that, I don't know why I use that language, but, yeah, going to the middle grades was like a big thing, and then you just never walked through that hallway again.
Mhm.
You were just like, "Nope, I am now over here."
Yeah, I'm
Um,
too cool now.
yeah, and if somebody, some younger student found themselves in the wrong part of the hallway, they got ushered out.
I was gonna say, did you help them? Did you help them find their way?
I don't remember having that experience, so,
Okay.
who knows?
Okay.
But again, it was one of those things where there's very clear demarcations and
Mhm.
rules. And I would say probably the only place I can think of that this concept isn't sacred is in places where are no rules or regulations or restrictions or definitions or whatever.
But even
But
at
I think
that,
even an anarchist have, a leader and the guys
mhm.
who are the closest to the leader. And I mean, I'm guessing.
Even in the service industry, even though it's not clearly outlined, even among
Oh no,
servers,
seriously, I've seen that.
yes. So yes, in the higher end restaurants, there you have a team, so you have a captain, a back server, and all that. That is definitely defined, right? Where your role is and your role of importance
Mhm.
within the group. In regular restaurants, there's a difference between the bartenders and the servers, but even within just the servers where there's not an actual team,
Mhm.
everybody knows that's the senior server. They
Mhm.
get the best sections, they get the best shifts. It's just kind of
They've been here the longest, they've earned it.
right.
And if the system works according to how the systems work, if I someday stay that long, I'll have the same.
Mhm.
Yeah, I have worked in very hierarchical food service industry kind of things, but the hierarchy was based on a different,
Set of rules.
yeah.
Mhm.
And just being a woman was just,
It was funny.
just no.
I worked for a chef owner before, and he just kind of joked that they would hire people, and he just knew that if that person was right for being there, that they would stay. And his reasoning was he said that servers are like a pack of wolves,
Mm,
or like restaurants are like a pack of
mhm,
wolves, that when you join in the group, either you're accepted or you're not, and it's very clear.
mhm.
And you either get to stay or you don't. It's kind of how it works. I hate to laugh about that, but it's very true. It's very sad that it works like that. But yes.
No, I mean, I remember taking my puppy to the dog park, and she would just basically just walk in and lay down and show her belly and just be like, "I'm
I'm here for you guys. I'm not any harm.
no threat whatsoever, not even trying."
Hmm.
Yeah, and just to see it, you would, other dogs would snipe and bark and whatever, and it always would make me nervous.
Right.
And, there would be somebody who wiser, older, possibly drunker, would be like, "Yeah, they'll figure it out."
And they do.
Yeah.
Dogs are actually very, very good at that. They typically, as most people know, there's a hierarchy within packs, right? And I think that initiations are all kind of a part of that,
Oh,
of
yeah.
either welcoming somebody, well,
The
probably if you're going
investigation.
through it, that you are being welcomed into a group,
Mhm.
that but it's a very formalized typically, and that you typically have to go through something.
Mhm.
It's not just given, it's earned either by work preparation in beforehand or what you have to go through as part of the initiation. I'm not a part of a gang, and I cannot speak to this personally, but from what I know is that oftentimes in gangs, part of the process is getting you get jumped in, putting that in quotes. Right? You get beat up to be a part of, to show that you can handle, you're
Mhm.
tough,
Mhm.
can handle your own
Stuff.
self.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And the most formal initiation I was ever in, and I'm not gonna be able to say most of the words that go with this, so just bear with me. I was part of a sorority, but I was a legacy, which meant, in my case, my mother, my grandmother, my aunt, my great aunt,
Mhm.
like, every female relative I
The
had.
ladies of your family? Mhm.
And when it came time for, after going through the pledging process and all of the rest of the things that we had to do in order to show our commitment, there was an initiation ceremony. And I remember it was one of the bigger surprises of my life to walk in, and my grandmother and my mother were both there.
Mhm.
And it made it incredibly special. So special that I really don't remember the initiation. I just remember it was a moment that I was identifying with them.
Mhm.
We were all kind of the same thing. And yeah, that was very special. But presumably they had done the same work, in
Mhm.
the decades before. But at the time, sororities were still considered secret societies. They aren't anymore. There aren't closed initiations and things like that, which
Is that for legal reasons?
probably.
Mm.
But so I think the things that we've established that kind of make this woo is it is a separation,
Mhm.
and it is an identification,
Mhm.
and it is usually led by someone.
Yes.
You usually have to prove yourself in some way,
Mhm.
and there's usually some sort of memory memory flag that you are creating
Yes.
for the experience, and then you get a trinket at the end. or
Hopefully.
stripe,
Yeah, something,
a belt.
a belt, something that shows that you've reached or attained this level.
And I think if you look at like every wizarding movie, every witch movie,
Mhm.
every movie that has some sort of supernatural component, they always have this part of it in there. And I think if you look at your own metaphysical walk,
Mhm.
you see those things. And gentle listener, if you look at your own metaphysical walk and you're like, I haven't really ever felt like I earned those things or I did those things or whatever,
Mhm.
maybe it's time to set yourself up an initiation.
Yeah. Okay. So, I think we have
Initiated this one?
correct, yes. At a loss for words.
All right. So
What's our next letter?
it is
J.
yeah.
All right. So I guess what we hope to have you again for next time.
All the woo.
A to Z.